Sure. How many more chairs we got? 2? Okay. 3. Howdy. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I'll introduce myself. I'm Bill Richards, and you guys, everybody here for Introduction to Unix? Okay, and most of you have not been on a Linux box before, correct? Okay. Well, you're in for a rude awakening. See if this stupid thing will work. There it goes. Introduce myself. My name is Bill Richards. Like I said, I've been around IT for a while, but I started off in the Air Force way back in '70. I did about 8 years, got out for a couple of years with the FAA, came back in, and basically I was a ground fuel specialist, or that was basically a refueling guy for aircraft. Then I went into air traffic control. And then I got commissioned and went into AWACS and spent the rest of my career here, mostly coming to and leaving from Tinker Air Force Base and going all over the world. After I retired in '94, I went to work for the Defense Information Systems Agency. And up until last September when I retired, I basically worked there as a Unix and a Windows administrator, and then became a network security officer, and then became chief of network operations. Shortly after I became chief of the network operations there, we were responsible for all of DISA sites from the Mississippi West, and we had a site in Montgomery that was responsible for everything to the east. Then about a year later, we merged and became a virtual organization where both the CCC down at Montgomery and the one at here at Oklahoma City managed all the networks jointly, but we had different functions. My final role was Chief of Enclave Operations. I was responsible for about 21 full-size networks, both classified and unclassified, around the world, stretching from Europe to Hawaii. And then as enterprise email, which is, I don't know if anybody's heard of that, mail.mil is what they're using now for the government, and they're migrating a lot of people to it. Basically, they start putting in little clusters around the world, all the way from Korea to Bahrain to Afghanistan to Kuwait, Iraq, you name it. And we manage those smaller networks for the email servers, and of course the administrators also manage those servers. So it was a pretty big enterprise, and I got pretty involved in networking for the last 10 years. I did teach at Rose out here from 2004 to 2010 until the word chief started being associated with my name, and then I started losing a lot of bandwidth in terms of being able to conduct a class and not be interrupted by phone calls or having to go TDY and miss classes and stuff like that. So I took a hiatus for about 5 years until I retired finally, and now I'm back. My first introduction to Unix was in 1989 when we got a AT&T 3B2 computer system given to us in our squadron in AWACS. And ever since then I've been hooked on it. 1994, just after I retired from the Air Force, is when I became familiar or introduced to Linux. And like I said, I've been a Unix junkie ever since. I've really enjoyed Unix. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot you can do with it. And tonight I'm just going to kind of give you a brief introduction to it. And then on Thursday I'll give you some more information. And but we won't really need your computers. We won't need to use the computers in class until next week. And at which time we'll have images for all of you on the vSphere. How many people have used vSphere? Good, good. There'll be a Linux image there already installed. You will be disappointed when you find out there's no GUI. You'll have access to that later, but I want you to start out with no GUI, because X Windows, which is their GUI, just like the GUI we see with Microsoft Windows, is an application that's laid over top of the operating system. And it's just a user interface. And I gotta admit, it's pretty neat stuff. I, like anybody, enjoy wallpaper and stuff like that. So, but the real fun with Unix is down at the shell script and learning the different commands and stuff like that. So, real quickly, I just want to know who you guys are. So let's start over here. Tell me who you are. What your goal is, and do you have any Linux experience or whatnot?
Okay, well, my name's Josh Mahoney. My goal is just to get my associates in cybersecurity here at Rose, and then I'm going to transfer to OSU OKC. I have no Unix or Linux experience, and it's basically what I expect to learn from this class.
Yeah, you're going to need a lot of that in cybersecurity. There's a lot of tools that are inherent to the Linux and Unix systems, and there's a lot of opportunities to take that further down the road. But I'm sure if you press on with that cybersecurity program, which is a good one, you'll get a lot of Unix Linux experience. There are a lot of job opportunities out there. In fact, one of my former students was working for me like the last 4 years. I don't know if anybody knew Chris Smith. He just graduated last, I think, September, October. And he got his degree at OSU Okmulgee. And he didn't go to the Tulsa thing and do the CIT thing, but we had 2 or 3 other interns come through DISA that had, and they were very good people. I think some of them are working downtown now, some of them still working with DISA. So there's a lot of opportunities. Okay, how about you?
My name is Casey Mills. Obviously, I want to finish my education here and then take it a little further, but I don't know what I want to do yet, and I don't have any Unix.
Okay, but you're kind of leaning towards IT stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. In case any of you don't understand, I don't know, it's me that can't hear you. If you notice from my curriculum there, or my resume, I spent a lot of time around the flight line, and as a result, I've got a high frequency hearing loss. So that if you speak low, I ain't going to hear you, or I'm going to have a lot of troubles. That's for sure. But I can just barely get you, Stacy. So,
It's
all right.
Casey.
Huh?
It's Casey.
Casey?
Yes.
Okay. Casey. All right, you're next.
My name's Chris Henning. Right now I'm working on a network cybersecurity degree, and then I'm going to likely go to TU and move forward with bachelor's and master's. No experience with Unix, Linux, so.
Well, if you intend to go to TU and pursue that cybersecurity stuff, you're going to need
I
it.
have to have it.
You're going to have to love it too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to enjoy yourself very much. Like I said, 2 of my interns that were out there just have gone through TU and did excellent. In fact, we still got one out there now that's working as network security. And you?
Cody Chronister. I want to complete my associates here, go to CIT, get my bachelor's, and transfer to Tulsa for my master's.
Greg?
My Unix-Linux experience was some in Cyber Patriot, but Ken gave us a crash course, and I got lost almost immediately.
Okay, and you?
My name is Ryan DeBolt. I'm finishing my associates this semester, and I'm kind of just winging it.
Just winging it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm Ralph Elliott. I'm working on my associates in cybersecurity, and then hopefully I'm going to transfer to OSU.
Good. Good.
And I have, I guess I had one assignment in one class where I used Unix-Linux, but that was about it.
Okay. And you?
My name is Misty Martin. My goal is also to graduate from OSU with my bachelor's. I'm a Colby. I had no idea what Unix-Linux was, so over the Christmas break, I went online and just kind of looked it up and read some people's, just their chat stuff, and got a little bit of an idea. So I was a little terrified, and that is what I want to learn from this class: is how to get through it and know it very well.
Good. And you?
I'm Dave McGar. I plan to get my associates in cybersecurity here, transfer somewhere from a bachelor's, not sure yet. My experience with Linux, downloading a bunch of smaller distros to try and run on old hardware, and then anymore it's basically used to save files off of old Windows computers.
Okay.
My name is Patrick Quillen. Trying to get my cybersecurity here at Rose and then go on to OSU afterwards. No experience in Linux at all, and I'm trying to get as much as I can out of it.
Okay. You?
My name is Samuel McCool. I'm also getting my associates in cybersecurity here, and then I plan on going to some branch of OSU and getting my bachelor's. I have no experience with Unix-Linux, so hope to learn a lot.
Hope that'll change. Okay.
Well, that's me. I'm Michael Smigo. My education goals are to get my associates, cybersecurity here, and transfer somewhere. I don't know where yet. I think I used Linux at my friend's house once. That was many moons ago. And I hope to gain some experience from this class.
Okay.
Colt Sutton. My associates, my associates here for cybersecurity do bachelor's. They have a branch. OSU does classes here. Maybe go on to Tulsa. Really haven't done much Unix-Linux. I had audited a course from Harvard for programming in C, and they used a virtual machine that was a Windows Unix merge. They merged the systems and it used some Unix systems for programming in C, but not much experience besides that.
Okay, and you?
My name is Vic Deckerman. I'm kind of a server geek. I work for a software development company. I babysit some hosting systems there. I don't have any Unix experience. Although Linux, I do have Kali Linux, Puppy, a couple other distros. Kind of like everybody else, just random ones that pulled offline for different things. But I'm planning on finishing up here and then probably moving to OSU as well. I don't know if I'll stay there for my master's or not, but just kind of taking that as it comes.
Okay, and you?
Leroy Halstead. I'm going to get my cybersecurity associates and to the VA, find out what we're going to do next. And I have no experience in Unix-Linux.
Okay.
And you're here to teach me everything I need.
I'm going to try to, yeah. Yeah, well, you guys all have some interesting goals. Most of them seem to be the same. I think a lot of you will be taking classes together for the next year or two with that cybersecurity stuff, yeah. But, I encourage you all to keep on pushing with the degree. I had an opportunity to get my degree just after I got out of high school, but I was too young and too ready to enjoy freedom and not have to listen to what everybody else was telling me to do. So I didn't get around to working on my college degree until I really got on the Air Force and active duty. And so that's quite an effort to try and do that while you're working a full-time job. And I can remember at one point a friend of mine when I was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base down in Florida, we saw more of each other than we did of our families because we were on the same crew in the RAPCON down there. We both bagged groceries at the commissary, and we both went to the same classes. You know, at lunch we'd go to a class at lunch, and then we'd go to classes on swings and stuff like that. And so I saw more of him. And then, believe it or not, he ends up in AWACS years later after I came out. He got out and came back and ended up in AWACS too. So. But we both finally knocked off our degrees and got commissioned and ended up flying AWACS together for many years. But yeah, keep pushing. There's a lot of opportunity. Rose State is a good jumping stone for a lot of this, and they're getting better and better every day. Like I said, I started with them back in 2004, and it's a lot of opportunities. So keep on pushing all that stuff. Here's some of my contact information. wrichards@rosestate.edu, and then there's my home email address as well at Gmail. And I'm still trying to figure out which one, how I log in from my regular Gmail account and get onto that Raider one too. That's weird. I don't even know why you needed a Raider.gmail account, but I guess because it was Gmail gave it to the Rose State for free, I guess. There'll be a website where you can pull down additional information. I'm just kind of resurrecting it from back in 2010 when I went on break there for a while. I'll be posting all the PowerPoints there as well, but I'll be doing it on D2L. And I'll try and lean more towards D2L and see what I can port from my old website into D2L. I have a lot of old links I got to go through to make sure they're all still good and stuff like that. And but it'll be available to you later this week, and then I'll keep you guys posted as I put more and more on D2L. I've already posted today's presentation and the syllabus on D2L, so that stuff will be available to you as well. The syllabus review. Just want to go over this real quickly because I think I'm supposed to. It's just basically tells you we're going to do Unix-Linux. Talks about the book we're using. It's not so much a course book as it is just a book for reference for you. I'm not going to teach it out of this book, but this is where you can go for, you know, reading about it, understanding some of the commands and stuff like that, and how to do scripting and whatnot. And there's a lot of other things. You know, it also comes with a distribution of Fedora in it. It's a pretty good book. A lot of people seem to like it. I think that's what they taught with last time around, and so I decided to stick with it. There'll be like I said, a DVD in there for you to use. The interesting thing about Unix-Linux is that, you know, you can install it on a computer just as the sole operating system. You can use VMware and install it into a virtual system on your Windows box. You can put it on a USB and boot up off of a USB. You can put it on a DVD, boot up off of a DVD. There's a lot of capabilities with it. So, you know, it's kind of amazing what they've done with it over the years, and they quite literally have shoehorned it in just about anything. And a lot of what came from Unix, later Linux, you'll find in your Android type phones, or, you know, if you ever get behind the scenes, behind the GUIs there, you'll find that it's a very similar operating system. This basically just talks a little bit about the grading. The grading is going to be pretty simple. Based on the fact that after talking to Ken, and I'm still trying to get used to everything these days, the new stuff, this course will be taught during the summer all online. And so obviously when it's done online, there's no attendance capability per se, vices, assignments and whatnot. And so as I adapt my old briefings and update them to the newer versions of Linux and the newer operating systems, the newer capabilities here at Rose, I'll push all that out to you guys. And but basically, bottom line is attendance is not going to be graded on it here. I mean, I'll try and keep an eye on who's coming, who's not coming. And then if you don't do a good showing on the first test, I'll make a point of having a discussion with you about, well, if you're going to learn something, if you can't learn it on your own, you might as well come in here. At least I can answer questions for you and whatnot. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I will apologize in advance that on occasion I do wander off the path and go down and start talking some war story or something like that. And there's various little geeky things out on the internet that always pique my interest, and I'll get going down those paths and start talking on that stuff sometimes. In fact, I think one time I even talked to an entire class about Jeremiah weed. Anybody know what that is? Good. Stay away from it. And it's not something you smoke, okay? It's just so you don't understand. But anyway, the class schedule, week 1, week 2, and all that stuff is going to be there. I'm still kind of trying to make sure I got everything covered. The main thing I want to do is get you at the prompt, the shell prompt in Unix, and start teaching you some of the commands and some of the neat things to go along with some of the stuff I'm going to mention here in the presentation today about what's the whole philosophy behind Unix and stuff like that. And but it's pretty interesting. I find Unix very interesting. Let's see, where's my presentation? It should be there. Nope, wrong one. That one, yeah. Okay, so Life with Unix. Well, why did I say Life with Unix? My favorite book, Life with Unix. It doesn't teach you much about Unix as it does more about the philosophy and what goes on with it. I don't want to get into a lot of them, but there's when Unix first started coming out, and it took root initially in the universities and the educational systems around the United States, and then eventually around the world. And there was in the very beginning, one of the first things they wanted to be able to do is communicate to and from different Unix servers. So a lot of Unix had a lot of emphasis on making networking become a reality. And in the early days, a Unix box would be just a big server, and people would be connected to it via dumb terminals. You just run a serial cable from the back of a terminal, plug it into a Unix box, and hit enter a couple times, and next thing you know, you have a prompt. And that's kind of how I got involved in Unix in the very beginning. Like I said, we were given this great big AT&T 3B2 computer, which really wasn't that big. It wasn't too much bigger than that podium there sitting on the table. Well, it was a little bigger than that, but we started scrounging up dumb terminals all around Tinker Air Force Base and running a serial cable all around our squadron. And we were connecting in the commanders and the deputy commanders and the directors of operations and the flight chiefs. And next thing you know, the first and greatest thing they ever got was email. This is back in 1989. And then we finally got it hooked up to the Tinker network, which was still under development in those days. And so now we had access to the internet. And I can remember my first few days on the internet where the only way you get from one place to another was really FTP and Telnet were it. And I remember the first time I FTP'd into a site in Japan, and it was at the University of Tokyo or something like that, and did a directory listing. And there were all these applications that I could pull down the source code for and compile it and do stuff with it. And it became pretty neat. And of course, email, back in those days, it's just second nature to everybody now. But back in those days, it was the new thing, and it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, literally. And during some of my deployments, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were able to set up a computer in our operations center in Saudi Arabia, and believe it or not, we were able to establish email back and forth between there and here in 1991. And what did we use it for? Well, everybody's deployed, and the people, or some of them aren't deployed, but they have to write performance reports on people. It's a yearly thing. You have to write an annual enlisted performance report or an officer performance report, and so that has to be done. And it's taboo not to make your suspenses on that. So how do you do that? Well, the guy you're writing the ticket on is over in Saudi Arabia, and you're here in Tinker. How do you get the information? Email. Back in those days, you didn't have to worry about people intercepting your email, so you can basically just pass all that information along. And so we were able to do things like that, and if somebody was coming up on a flight check or something like that before the war started, you had to rotate them back and get a flight check and then get back out into Saudi Arabia. So it was very useful to us, and so we were able to do a lot of things with it. But just like any system, they're all operating systems. Most of you understand the general idea of what an operating system is, and it basically manages your computer resources, your memory, your disk space, your CPU, all your input-output peripherals. You know, nowadays it's all USB. Back in those days, it was PPTs and or not PPTs, but PTRs and or LPT ports, serial ports, and there's a lot of different things you could do. So the computer and the operating system marry together and make all that stuff happen. The operating system will schedule routine tasks. It gives you a platform on which you can run applications. Like I said, in the early days, Unix wasn't GUI. Windows didn't exist. X Windows came along later in the Unix world and was rather rudimentary, but it served its purpose. Nowadays, you'll have your operating system, Linux, say, and then you'll have X Windows running on top of it, and then on top of that, you'll have a Windows Manager, KDE or GNOME, or any one of other ones, and those are the ones that give it the personality and the glitz and the glamour, if you will, to make it pretty. And then finally, the last thing an operating system does, it provides an interface between you, the user, and the computer that you want to do things for you. And so it's pretty simple when you look at it that way. It's a very simple operating system. You don't know it, you're not familiar with it, so you're going to think it's complex. But it's not, it's simple. That's the whole premise behind Unix. You have to be a genius to understand that it's simple. It really is simple. There's some very early tenets that they talk about in Unix that I'll get to in just a minute that explain to you what's really going on. And guys, help me keep track on time here too, because I'll end up talking so long, go right past 1:45, I think is when the class stops, right? Okay, so don't hesitate to wake me up and pull me in. Back in the early days of computers, and they basically did batch processing, which is people would spend the better part of the day putting together the commands to make this process work, and then they would put it in a directory or schedule it some way, and then at a certain time during the wee hours of the night, the computer would go in there and process each of those routines that people had stored there and process them.
So rude of me. I heard
Hi.
you were back, and I had to
Hi,
come and
Eileen.
say
How you
hi.
doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. And so anyway, the batch processing is basically the name of what was given to the process of just doing a whole bunch of jobs. We would take a batch of jobs and we would process them. Batch processing. Simple as that. And when you talk, if you ever meet somebody who was in the mainframe world, y'all have heard of mainframes, right? Yeah, okay. These are big, huge chunks of iron that compute. But they did a lot of batch processing, and they would schedule jobs for the wee hours of the morning to be processed. And they still do it today. One of the big things we had to deal with in DIS all the time was, you know, we have a lot of Windows machines and servers now that interface with these mainframes that still do a lot of the base supply systems and the accounting and finance and purchasing and all that kind of stuff. And if something doesn't get done in a timely manner and the information doesn't come from the Windows Server world and gets into the mainframe in time, then the mainframe can't complete its batch processing. And so it always becomes a big sticking point come morning when they find out all those batch jobs they had loaded last night to run didn't run. And now they're behind the power curve. And then, of course, everybody starts getting tense, and it goes on and on. But basically, you set your data, your file, or whatever it is, to be processed. It becomes a collection, a batch of files, and then they get processed, and you get the results of what happened. Whether it's a bunch of accounting, number crunching, and stuff like that, or what. Okay, the Unix operating system was developed way back in the 70s, actually 69 to be more specific. It was based on an operating system called Multex. which was I don't know if it was I can't really tell you much about it other than I know that Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie were the guys that worked on making Unix a reality, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But basically, it was all because of the fact that on this Multech system, there was a game they had created called Space Wars, and it was kind of a text variant type game, and when they took away the Multech system, shut it down, there was a hole in Ken's life, obviously, and he wanted to play this game. So he found a dusty old computer in the corner and started hacking away at it to get an operating system run on it that he could run and play Space War on. So I'm going to go to a quick web page here real quick and give you a quick little Unix presentation. This is a license plate that came out many years ago at one of the early Unix conventions, and it became the thing of lore and legend. They actually have one of the original ones, but they do remake them every once in a while. So let's see here. I gotta use the mouse for this one. In the beginning, there was Multex. It's conceived as a commercial product for General Electric and Honeywell, and it stood for Multiplexed Information and Computing System. It was started in 1964. I'll try and read off this screen rather than turn my head around, but I have to put my glasses on to do it. It was a mainframe time-sharing operating system, and it was used until about 2000 around the world. Many novel and valuable ideas came from Multex, and had a big impact. And the most important one was Unix. Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie. The roots of Unix began back in Bell Labs in 1969 from a Multics installation. It ran on it's basically Multics is the operating system, and it ran on a mainframe per se. And it was a serious resource hog. It had gone out of control, and in 1969 at AT&T Bell Labs in New Jersey, they basically shut it down. Programmers like Ken Thompson mostly, and then later Dennis Ritchie, kind of missed that community that they had on that Multech system, and the the group hack spirit, I guess, if you will. So as luck would have it, there was a unused PDP-7, which you're going, well, what the heck is that? Well, I'll show you in a minute. It was a mini computer, not too many by our standards today, but mini back then. Cost about $72,000. Let's see here. And that's it. And that's what they developed Unix on. Look at the keyboard. It's a frickin' teletype. Or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, it was one of digital 18-bit machines. 18-bit. And here we are running 64-bit operating systems now. And so how many of you lived through Y2K? Yeah. Were you aware of it back then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How about the, what was it? I have to remember now. I'm stretching my imagination. When the computer time systems exceeded the 32-bit capability. Anybody remember when that happened? Sometime after 2000. I can't remember the exact. I'll dig. I got some files on it. There's another one coming up too in like 2038 or something like that, where we're going to run out of the 64-bit clocks will no longer work on your operating systems unless you get some kind of a patch, because it'll stop telling time, or actually it's kind of funny because in Unix it starts over again back in, I wish I could remember the date. I think sometime in 1970. I'm not sure. I'll find those files for you and show it to you guys one night. This is Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. They're working on the PDP-7, and back behind them, if you can see, are tapes up there on top, in the top left corner of that thing behind them. What's funny is up until a few years ago, the AWACS operating system was loaded by tapes. That big tapes like that. We used to have carry these big tape cartridges all the time. And when you go on a deployment to a place where there wasn't a support facility for AWACS, you'd have to carry footlockers full of tapes just so that you can record your missions and stuff like that. and now they've got it all on a hard disk pack and stuff like that, so it's a lot easier to maneuver and carry and stuff like that. But back in those days, when Unix started out, it was all on tape. Now, when they originally started Unix, they called it UNICS, which are some, if you think about it, in your mind's a little bit imaginative, you can come up with some oddball connotations for what their inferences are. But basically, they changed it to Unix, just a quick play on the words by putting an X on the end. Kind of took away the Unix thing there. So that's just an old Dilbert cartoon that I picked up that I thought was kind of funny. Okay, so like I said, he wanted to play this Multics space travel game called Space Wars, and the only hardware available was that PDP-7. And so they started programming on it, and they wrote the first Unix kernel. Is anybody familiar with what a kernel is? I'm not talking in the military rank either. Okay. Did you know there's a kernel inside of Windows? Okay. Cool. So basically, they ended up getting a PDP-11 eventually, and they made it bigger, better, faster, yada yada. And one of the other big things that came out of Unix is the C programming language. Everybody's heard of that, right? How many people have actually programmed in C? Just a couple? It's not pretty. They've come up with some newer C, C++, C++, Visual C, all kinds of crap. But so anyway, back in the early 70s, they started sharing tapes with colleagues, and there's a couple links in here I think I put down that is kind of interesting. That at some point, the thing that we all have to deal with once or twice in our lives, hopefully only once or twice, you have to deal with lawyers. And lawyers have their own way of looking at things, and of course the lawyers for AT&T didn't think it was right, and there was some liability in there or something, that if you shared this operating system with some college in California, that, I don't know, California might break off and sink into the oceans or something like that and sue AT&T for it. But that's the way I think lawyers think, so I don't know for sure, not being a lawyer. But the bottom line is the University of Berkeley received one of these tapes. And what would happen is they shared the tapes, and then of course when they got the tapes, they got the source code. So what are you going to do if you're a mechanic? You're going to tinker with the operating system, and you're going to make it bigger, better, faster, or you're going to develop additional utilities and stuff like that. And using all the tenets that I'll get into in a little bit here about Unix, how am I doing? I got 25 minutes, okay. Basically they would share these tapes, and they would share the updates and the new programs and stuff. And it got to the point where they even had to be kind of clandestine about it, because there's actually, and I think it's on one of the websites, I think I read it last night, they were talking about, I think it was someplace in California where somebody got a call, said, listen, I got all the latest, greatest updates for the Unix operating system, but I can't give them to you. But if you go to this point on this road in some valley out in California and look behind a bush or something, you will find a tape. And I bet you could probably use that, just so they keep the lawyers out of it, Didn't want to be witnessed exchanging the tape. But, so some funny stuff happened in the early days. Anyway, the California thing is important, and I play it up because of Berkeley. Berkeley was one of the organizations, universities, that really jumped on Unix. And they eventually came in with their own flavor of Unix, called BSD, Berkeley Systems. I can't even remember what the distribution, that's what it is. Bill Joy, anybody know who he was? No? Okay. I'll tell you guys later. In fact, I can't even remember now. It's been so long since I looked that up. But he was a big player back in the early days of Unix. And I'll have to remember, but I got it somewhere, and I'll bring it in. So anyway, they started coming up with these little applications, and a lot of them don't make a lot of sense to you. You know, when you see the name of the little application, and that line there at the bottom is a bunch of them: awk, CPIO, EXPR, find. Find, you can understand what that means, right? Find something. So that's an easy one. Lint, make, sh, sed, tail, tar, touch. So a lot of these you'll be using. Not all of them. I mean, there's some of the ones down there, malloc and stdio. You don't necessarily use it, but you'll recognize what it is. I mean, it stands for standard in out, is what it means. And that's part of one of the Unix tenets. String, most of you probably know what the string means. It's basically an expression. Awk, it's an editor, and I'll profess I never have gotten very used to that one, so I don't use it very often. CPIO, yeah, that's a good one. Copy, in, out. That's what it stands for. CP is copy. The command for copy in Unix is CP, not copy, CP. The command for move is MV. So a lot of them the same. Directory on Unix is LS. And there's a lot of command line switches to it so that you can format your output differently. You can get a detailed view, you can just get a view of the file names, or you can get a view of the file names with the directories highlighted with slash, all kinds of stuff. So we'll talk more about that when we get into that junk. Okay, so Unix started growing, and it grew and grew and it grew and it grew and grew, and it's still growing. And one of the things that I've yet to have a class to do it, but let's see if we can get it to go here. Open a new tab. This is a link that has a listing of the Unix history. And this little thing right up here, that's the family tree of Unix. See? And surprisingly, some people have printed it out and taped it on the walls of their classroom. I'm still waiting for the first volunteer class to do that, but I'm not encouraging it. Okay? But as you can see, it can be done. Yeah. You'll definitely kill a tree doing this. So, and that's one of the tenets of Unix, is not to kill too many trees. So. But there's a lot of links to this, and close out one of those. And this kind of explains it, and you can go here and look at it. You can see, here's Bill Joy. Let's see if I can remember what he was. Oh, page doesn't exist. Okay. Steve Jobs, everybody knew him, right? You all own one of his phones. Most of you communists do. I have an Android phone. And then, of course, Linus Torvalds, or however you say it. And then Richard Stallman. Anybody know who Richard Stallman is? You really should. You guys really should. He's the founder of the Free Software Foundation. And that is pretty, right now, tied hand in hand with Linux. It didn't come out that way in the beginning, and it's because Stallman started developing all the applications that go with the operating system before he started to develop the kernel. Linus started at the other end. He developed the kernel. Eventually they merged. But we'll get into that more later. Okay, so this is, these are, I was looking at them last night, and it's a little lame. Basically, this is from Linus back in, when was that, 91. He basically sent that, see, where was I, July of 91? July of 91, I was flying missions off the Gulf Coast from Panama City. And then 2 weeks later, we ended up in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, basically, he started a project. There was an operating system that had been put out a long time ago called Minix. Okay, 20 minutes, 19 minutes. And it was one that was actually in a textbook, and it was on a 3.5-inch floppy. It was in the back of the textbook, and it was a source code for a Unix-like operating system. Well, he liked it. Linus liked that after being taught that course, apparently, and decided to develop his own kernel. And this is his first offering out to the world. Back in those days, it wasn't Facebook and it wasn't a list server. It was a place called Usenet, where a lot of people would go in and basically look at messages people had posted into Usenet. And it wasn't a web-based posting. It was, you'd email it in, and you could pull down the archives and rip through all the email and stuff like that. That stuff's still out there, Usenet. It's morphed into something tremendously bigger than what it was in the early days, and I mean, it can be all the way from just nice, innocent stuff to literally not nice, innocent stuff, either graphically or program-like. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's a weird place to be. You don't want to hang out there too much unless you know what you're doing and you're well protected. So anyway, the next month he basically sent out that he's working on this and kind of porting and setting it up to run on a basically an x86 type system, right? A 386, 486 AT clone. And he was just looking for people to be interested, and sure enough, people helped him out and became interested. Then there was some butthead professor somewhere at a university that just didn't think it was. I think he was the original author of Minix. And he came back and said, I maintain the point that designing a monolithic kernel in 1991 is a fundamental error. I'll be thankful you're not my student. You would not get a high grade for such a design. And then he came back with a comment referring to Minix being so brain dead, and then he came back and said, well, you're developing this one. What's good about it? Just because it's got a cool name? And he said, yep, that's it. And that's where it came from. But I always thought this was interesting to me. I mean, it probably doesn't interest you because you're not that in tune to Unix and Linux. But anyway, 1991, the first .01 kernel was put out. And then the SLS standalone version of Linux was distributed on disk. Then Slackware, which became real popular in the early days, came out. And there were a bunch of others. And there was a book finally written in 1993. And 1994, Kernel 1.0 came out. I actually got into it just slightly before March. My first kernel was .94 or something like that I compiled. And literally it took 18 hours to compile. That wasn't the first time, because the first 3 or 4 times I had errors. Now, Linux, like I say, has been ported over to a lot of things, and this web browser has been surfing the web server on this Linux box here. This box came out in the mid-90s. It's basically a Sharp Zaris. Whoa. Now it's unplugged, but it's got a keyboard, it's got a little screen, you got a stylus that you tap on the screen and stuff like that. And it's pretty handy. I've had it for a long time. Basically, I use it just as an idea. I mean, nowadays it doesn't make the point as much as you can do now. There's a whole lot more you can do on your cell phone than what we can do on this little PDA. But it was pretty neat at its time. I mean, back in the mid-90s, you could put a web browser on it, you could do email, you could network with it. It's got a compact flash card. Basically, I even had a compact flash camera. I've got that at home where you just plug it in there and you can take pictures and stuff like that. Now your cell phones do all that. But it didn't have a cell phone capability, because cell phones really didn't exist very much back in those days. Probably in the early 95, 96 time frame, 97 maybe, is when cell phones really started catching on. Before that, they were just like these huge bricks and stuff like that. So I don't even think we're going to get through all of this stuff today, but that's fine. Okay, continuing on. We're starting to get into this, and we talked a little bit about Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. You might see their names again on a test, you know, just more likely. That's them in later years, back in, was it 1999, being awarded a National Medal of Technology from President Clinton. Okay, basically it's a multi-user OS. It allows more than one person to access it at a time. Most of your instances, you're going to do it at home or something like that, it's going to be accessed mostly by you. That AT&T 3B2 computer we had in our squadron, everybody accessed it. You know, we eventually ran out dumb terminals to all three of the operating squadrons, the flying squadrons, and to the director of operations, and eventually over to the wing commander and stuff like that, and gave everybody email. Once we were able to run Ethernet to each of the buildings and the different floors, we were able to connect regular computers, AT clones, up to, anybody remember, was it Zenith? What do they call them? Z248s? No, okay, that's really old. They were 286 CPU type computers, and we would use these thick coax cables to come down to them. We would basically use an intrusive vampire clamp, or we'd have to use a RG58 cable, would be about that big around, and we'd have a coring tool, and we had to core down through it and then hook the vampire clamp onto it so it could pierce the screen, and then it could pierce the core at the center and make all the connections so that you could actually have a network. And so that was, I can show you what that stuff looks like someday, but it was some rough stuff. But bottom line is multi-users. In the early days, it was all serial connections. Then it became Ethernet connections, so Unix server to Unix server. Then eventually they created clients on Windows workstations where you could connect from the Windows workstation into your Unix server, and then more and more stuff came, and it just kept growing. And that's supposed to illustrate time sharing. It doesn't do a good job, and I couldn't find a better picture for it. So the bottom line is that when you're doing time sharing and multi-users are in there doing multiple things, obviously you can exceed the capacity of the system based on the CPU and memory and stuff like that. But it gives each person a little slice of time, but it happens so fast it all seems like simultaneous to us. But it's in reality time shared. It just does it really, really fast. And that's the whole premise behind the Unix kernel, is just to do the primary job. And then as Linux came out and the other operating systems, Unix operating systems, started adopting the same thing, as they add modules to the kernel that you can load and unload at will to do additional things like Bluetooth. There's a whole list of things you can do. But anyway, a lot of colleges and universities got into the Unix world, and they really started taking advantage of reliability, the interest in the internet and file sharing and trading tapes. But in the early beginnings, it started off with Unix coming out of AT&T, and eventually it broke off into two different major trees, and eventually to that big chart you saw there. Bell Labs, which is the AT&T Bell Labs system, Unix Systems 5, and then BSD, Berkeley Systems Distribution. And then from there, everything branched out. And then there came versions for your personal computer that didn't really catch on. There was Xenix and a couple of others. I think SCO was one of them. A few others that people just didn't do very well until Linux came along. And in the early 90s, that's when Linux showed up. Linus was the guy that made it happen. One of his philosophies are not, I don't know if I'll call it philosophy or just his preferences, he feels that a free beer and Linux go together. That's the whole premise of it. It's just, you can have a beer for free. It's a nice thing. Linux, you can get an operating system for free. It's a nice thing. So he made the source code open to everyone, and then they came out on the GNU license and all that stuff. Competition among hackers, because in my world, when I say hacker, I'm normally talking about a good person, not a malicious person, a person that likes to tinker with code. Just like you call a mechanic a grease monkey, not derogatory, it means he likes to muck around with cars and engines. And then everything evolved into the open source and all this stuff, and that all came along later. Unix is, they used to call it a work-alike version. That's what Linux is, a work-alike version of Unix. I've always, since, like I said, I cut my teeth on Unix on an AT&T Systems 5, and when I got Linux, I didn't see the difference. To me, it was the same. And I was more than happy to be running it on my computer at home. And then other things, like I said, I mentioned Richard Stallman, and I know I've got a presentation I've given before on that, and I'll probably bring it in someday and when I know we get ahead of things and spend some time looking at that, because it's kind of interesting what this guy did, and he's a little bit of an odd character, as many people are in the Unix world. Some people said there were concerns about there being as many versions of Linux as there are people, and that may be true. There are a lot of different versions out there. Obviously, Fedora is probably one of the more popular ones. It started out as Red Hat. Then Red Hat decided to make a commercial business out of their company and their name, and they started focusing on server-based or a server operating system versus a workstation, and they branched Fedora off and kept it free. You can go to, I forget the website now. It used to be fedora.org, but now it's something else, fedora-something .org.
You can get some on DistroWatch, I think.
What was that?
You can get some of them on DistroWatch.
Oh yeah, DistroWatch got it. There's a ton of them out there, and they'll take Linux and they'll literally build a distribution that's an ISO image you can drop on a DVD. And when I taught wireless one summer, I used that, and it boots up with Linux, but it's got all the wireless hacking tools you could ever want. It's got the scanners, it's got the decoders, it's got debugger, it's got everything you need. You can sniff out access points. It's pretty amazing some of the stuff they can squeeze into a distribution on a DVD. But one thing about Linux or Unix is it doesn't blue screen. I've never had a Linux server crash. In fact, it's kind of fun. I used to joke. I had a server, and back in the early days when I was teaching, and you all know Ken Dewey? You should, yeah. Most of you should. He used to run a little network ISP out of his garage. He had a room in the back of his garage that was air conditioned and whatnot. And I hosted a server out there for a very long time. And the server literally it was almost online without a reboot for almost 2 years. And you know what? Want to know what took it offline? A drunk driver. Ran into the main power pole out in his neighborhood out in Choctaw, and it took out all the power, and eventually the UPS died, and my server went down. That was almost 2 years it ran without. So it'll stay up a long time. Now the two servers I run right now, I looked at them last night. They're both maybe up about 40 days or something like that, because I occasionally do a reboot just to make sure all the patches and kernel stuff gets in there. Unix philosophy in a nutshell is really simple. The whole intention to do things is keep simple, and that's what you find here in the tenets here in a minute. Small is beautiful, and basically they intend to write a code, have it do what it wants to do, and that's all it does, but it does it really well. And so that's what these first two tenets are about. Small programs are easy to understand, they're easy to maintain, it consumes fewer resources, and they're easier to combine with other tools. Program that does something, does it well, and that's all it does, no frills attached. That's what a lot of the little programs that go along, utilities that go along with Unix are all about. Build a prototype. And I think, did I say that? Oh, I didn't. I got a link to this stuff here somewhere. It's out on Wikipedia, and you can read it. It's actually kind of interesting stuff to read if you want to get a little bit of better understanding about Unix and Linux. Okay, build a prototype as quick as possible. So in other words, make it easy to build something and see if it works. Trial and error. Choose portability over efficiency. Make it easy. Something right. That's the big thing about C code is it's more portable than any other language out there. There may be some newer languages that are more portable than it. I don't know about them because I'm not a programmer. By the way, there are two things you need to be worried about as a system administrator in this world. Do you know what they are? Obviously, one is programmers, right? You know what the other one is? DBAs. The little bastards will sneak up on you every time. You got to watch them like a hawk. If you're an administrator, DBAs and programmers are dangerous. Don't tell them I told you that, but that's true.
I've heard that from my system administrator. He's like, I hate these
If you've ever managed a network or managed a server and had to deal with them, you know you can't trust them. And then in third in line is the Windows system administrators. They're untrustworthy too. But okay, the interesting thing about Unix, and we're down to the last 3 minutes or 2 minutes really. You store numerical data in flat ASCII files, and when we start explaining the file system, I'll explain that a little more. But most of the stuff in Unix is a flat ASCII file, flat text file. It can be made to look like a binary, but the bottom line is it's mostly just data. Use software leverage to your advantage. Basically, borrow good code from other programs. And that's the whole thing about open source is, all you got to do is give somebody credit, and that's you use their code, and that's it. Shell scripts. We're going to get into shell scripting quite a lot. I particularly like shell scripting. It's a lot of fun, a lot of capabilities, and it's not just like programming. It's using other programs already written and compiled, and using the output from them to pass to other programs, to accomplish an end goal. Okay, let's see if I'm going to kind of skip over most of this here. I don't think there's anything I want to talk about. And I'll just kind of briefly cover it when we get back here on Thursday. But you can, like I said, you can look at the PowerPoint. It's on D2L now. And can't think of anything else. We're going to be talking more about some of the philosophy behind Unix on Thursday. And again, next week is when we'll get into the images. And you get access and get your first look at a shell prompt and all that. Okay, now do y'all have access to D2L? Y'all have vSphere yet? Who doesn't have vSphere? Anybody? Okay. All right. How do we get them access? To go see Ken or what?
Yeah, Ken should be able
Ken
to.
or Roy? Roy? You guys know Roy?
Yeah, Roy.
Go see Roy. He can get you access to vSphere. If not, let me know next Thursday if you don't have access to vSphere, and I'll get Roy to get your information and get your accounts created. All right? All right, anybody got any questions for me? Okay, thanks. We'll see you Thursday.
So what's your go-to Linux distro? What's your favorite Linux distro?
I would pretty much Fedora, I think, right now for a workstation. I'm using CentOS for my server that's been on the internet since '95. But if you want to run a server, I'd recommend CentOS, which is a derivative of Red Hat server.
Have you
It's-
ran Ubuntu server software?
But I've played with Ubuntu. The thing I didn't like about Ubuntu is it tries to do too much for you, just like Windows.
Okay.
Everything, like if you get down to, you don't have immediate access to root unless you know how to get there.
Okay.
Root is the administrator account.
Yeah, I get down to it in the Android back when I messed around with some distros.
Yeah, and so that's what I didn't like about it, because they wanted you to use a program called sudo to issue all the commands that you need to do as an administrator. And I'm sorry, I just old school Unix. I like being root, and I like.
Go away from the very basics of Linux.
Yeah.
I played back in the day.
But yeah, I've used Ubuntu's got a lot of different variants that some of them are really nice. They do a good job of providing you the access to the GUI and all that stuff.
Yeah, most
Get
of
that
them
all
I
set
use
for you.
is the smaller ones, like I use Puppy Linux and damn small Linux. It's just so bad. Last time around, I used the Linux-based. I think it was Norton who made it actually.
What was it called?
It's the Norton Recovery CD.
Oh yeah,
That was
that's
the
a
last
good one.
one.
Yeah,
That was the
yeah.
last one I used, which I kind of hate to use because it said Norton, but it worked well, so that was
Yeah.
nice. My laptop locked up on me and went out, so I had to get on and save files off of it.
Nowadays
for that. Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy messing with the different ones.
Yeah, there's so many different choices out there that you just have to experiment around until you get the one you want. I've always been kind of, like I said, Red Hat-ish, so Fedora and CentOS I like a lot.
I'll get back
I haven't
on
like
there.
messed it all with Fedora.
Oh, it's
I
been
really
3
should.
Yeah, it's designed for servers really, but everything they do is based out of the Red Hat server OS. It's just whatever that's not proprietary to Red Hat, they bring it out in the open source and make it available.
Okay. I started reading a book on it a long time ago. Can't remember most of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright, well, I'll see you later.
All right.